So good evening and welcome to the social project School of IT Professionals ProfIT based on National Aerospace University Kharkiv Aviation Institute. With today's event, we begin a series of meetings dedicated to space tech topic. I will leave details of such events in comments. And today we will talk with a legend, with President of the Mars Society, Robert Zubrin. Later, we are waiting for the founder of one of the hottest Ukrainian startups, SpaceCube, Yaroslav Azhnyuk, who will join us as a guest moderator of a Q&A section. So you can also leave your questions in the comments under the stream. Hi, Robert. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks for investing your time and experience in Ukrainian space industry, and especially in young people. So I won't take your time anymore. The stage is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so can we have my screen being shown?
Yeah, you can do it.
How do I do it? Is it showing now?
Not yet.
No, I don't. Here we go. All right, so now I think it is showing. True?
Not yet.
Really? What are you seeing now? Just me?
Yeah.
So Robert, maybe if you open Zoom window, there should be this green share screen button in the middle of it.
I don't see share screen.
Yes.
Now?
Yes, it is working now.
Okay. And is it in the slideshow or just the other one?
No, the presentation.
Let's start the slideshow. That's the button to the left. Yeah.
Yes, now we are good.
All right.
Okay. Hello, and thank you for inviting me, and thanks to everyone listening for coming to hear what I have to say. My topic today is the case for space, how the revolution in spaceflight opens a future of limitless possibility. I've written a book on this subject, which is going to be translated into Ukrainian and published. And perhaps after the talk, Yaroslav can tell people when and where they might be able to get that. Right now, it is available in English. Okay, so the revolution in spaceflight, what is that? This is the revolution of space entrepreneurship. Now, many of you probably witnessed this event yourself. We're looking here at February 2018, the launch and landing of the Falcon Heavy. Now, this was a very remarkable event. In 2009, President Obama had a high-level commission put together to analyze whether it would be possible to go back to the moon in our time. They said no, because developing a heavy lift launch vehicle, according to them, would take 12 years and cost $36 billion. Well, Musk did it in 6 years for a cost of less than $1 billion. And not only that, but the vehicle is 3/4 reusable. So what he managed to do was prove that it is possible for a well-led entrepreneurial organization to do things in 1/3 the time at less than 1/10 the cost that has been accepted as normal in the aerospace industry. And this has changed everything. And of course, SpaceX is not even satisfied with this accomplishment. Even though this is the best launch vehicle in the world, they're rapidly trying to make it obsolete by introducing a more advanced vehicle called a Starship, so that by the time someone else has something like this, they will have something better. Okay, now this entrepreneurial revolution is not just open to billionaires like Elon Musk. Working engineers have gotten investment. And here you see a launch of the company called Rocket Lab, which is a New Zealand company, and it's not led by billionaires. It's led by working engineers with middle-class incomes who have gotten investment. And they've reached orbit. And you know, New Zealand doesn't even have a space program, but New Zealand has reached orbit because of entrepreneurial activity. So the entrepreneurial revolution not only promises to make spaceflight much cheaper, it opens it up to every country and to people from every country. And of course, I think many of you may know that there is even an entrepreneurial space launch company in Ukraine called Firefly. Now, there's a couple of other revolutions at work at the same time. One is microsatellites. It is now possible to build satellites weighing 10 kilograms that can do the same thing that satellite used to take 1,000 kilogram satellite to do. And these satellites are much cheaper to launch and they're much cheaper to build. And this is opening up another form of space entrepreneurial activity. So I'm still waiting to see a SpaceX for spacecraft. Although there are some companies that hope to be that. Now, you know, with his Falcon vehicles, Musk has reduced the cost of space launch by about a factor of 5 compared to what it was 10 years ago. With the Starship, he hopes to cut it by another factor of 5 or more. And this will open up entirely new kinds of markets that go beyond satellite launch. And I'm looking here at intercontinental travel. Space is a global ocean. It surrounds the world. You know, for 3,000 years, people have made money on the Earth's ocean, and some by extracting wealth from the ocean, for example, by fishing. But much more money and much more important activity has been the use of the ocean as a low drag medium for global transport. Well, similarly, you know, there are people making money in space right now with satellites, communication satellites, remote sensing satellites. But space is also a global ocean of zero drag, and it is possible to pass through it to go anywhere to anywhere on Earth in less than an hour. And okay, last year there were 100 launches in the whole world. And maybe now that space launch is getting cheaper, we'll soon see 200 or 300. But there are that many intercontinental flights every hour, not every year. And once this market is opened, this will introduce mass production into spaceflight vehicles, just as it has into aircraft. And much cheaper rocket engines and other flight systems will be built on a mass production basis, which will make things even cheaper. Now, these new launch systems, if they're put to use properly, can open up extremely attractive options for developing the moon and Mars. And here there's one architecture called Moon Direct that I describe in my book. And key to it is not only the commercial launch vehicles, but another factor, the third revolution, which is the use of space resources, or the way I put it, creating space resources. Because I don't believe actually there's any such thing as a natural resource. There's only natural raw materials. It is technology that turns materials into resources. And there are materials on the moon that can be turned into resources supporting spaceflight. For example, making liquid oxygen out of lunar soil, or even making liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen out of lunar ice. And if you do that, the entire mission architecture, the whole plan for conducting operations becomes much, much simpler if you can make your return propellant on the moon. And it also gives you the capability of exploring the moon by flying around the moon using flight vehicles using lunar rocket propellant. And here is just one idea that I've advanced on how we can get water out of the permanently shadowed craters in the moon. The water is rare on the moon except near the poles in permanently shadowed craters that are very cold and have no light. So we need to bring energy into the craters to get the ice there out of it. And I propose short distance microwave transmission of this kind. Now, to me, the true frontier for humanity in at least this century is Mars. Mars is much richer in materials that can be turned into resources than the moon. It has much more plentiful water. There's water everywhere on Mars, and there's even glaciers as far south as 38 degrees north, which is the same latitude as Athens on Earth, which are pure water and which contain as much water as, for instance, the American Great Lakes. And there's a carbon dioxide atmosphere. There's no carbon on the moon, and carbon is essential for life and fuels and plastic and all sorts of other very important things. And there's basically every element you could want is available on Mars. And I've proposed a Mars mission plan, which I call Mars Direct, which works by first sending a Earth return vehicle, that's this one here, to Mars with no one in it. And it makes its propellant, which is methane and oxygen, out of the Martian atmosphere. And then once you have a fully fueled Earth return vehicle on Mars, then you send the crew out in a HAB module like this. Now, this plan has been subsequently embraced and changed by Elon Musk, his Starship. He sends an entire Starship to Mars, which runs on methane and oxygen propellant, and the fuel for its return is made on the surface of Mars, and then it is returned. There's a lot of good options for how you can fly a Mars mission once you are making propellant on Mars. And the goal is to create new branches of human civilization. You know, people ask me, what is the product that we could get from Mars? Well, one might ask, what is the product that Europe got from establishing colonies in America? Now, yes, there were certain things made there like tobacco and cotton, and they were able to loot gold from the Aztecs. But the real value of America for Western and global civilization has been the ideas it has produced, ranging from democracy to electricity, and aeroplanes and nuclear power and all these things. And you create a new branch of human civilization, it can produce things of enormous benefit for humanity. And I think a Martian civilization will be extremely inventive. It will have to be. It will be a group of technologically adept people in a frontier environment where they'll be forced to innovate and free to innovate. I think we'll see advances coming from them in everything from biotechnology to create ultra productive crops, which they will need because they'll be doing their farming in greenhouses, to robotics, which they will need because they will have a severe labor shortage, to things like fusion power, which they will need for energy because you can't just get fuel out of the ground on Mars. You have to make your energy. And deuterium, which is the fuel for fusion reactors, is 6 times as common on Mars as it is on Earth. Now, there's asteroids, and people talk about mining the asteroids. They are rich in precious metals, although if you want to mine asteroids, you will need to refine the metals there, because even though they're very rich in precious metals compared to what we have on Earth, the precious metal is still only a small fraction of the asteroid, and you don't want to have to move large quantities of worthless rock around the solar system. There's the outer solar system. Now, the outer planets are very rich in something called helium-3, which is the ideal fuel for a fusion reactor. And this entrepreneurial revolution in spaceflight is spreading to fusion power. Fusion power has been something that has stagnated for several decades now, in particular since the end of US-Soviet competition in this area. The government programs have lost any sense of urgency. But what investors have seen from Musk's example is the possibility that perhaps the problem with fusion power has not been fundamentally a technical problem, but an institutional problem, that maybe it's the wrong people doing it. And so now we're seeing heavy investment into a number of fusion power startups. And I think it is one of these that will ultimately make fusion power a reality. And the thing to understand about fusion power is that it is not just an additional source of energy, another way to light light bulbs. It is that is true, but it is something else more important than that. It is a new form of energy that allows you to do new types of things that are not possible otherwise. For example, fusion rockets. And a fusion rocket fueled with deuterium and helium-3 can actually produce an exhaust velocity as high as 7% the speed of light. And with proper engineering, it is possible to design a rocket with a maximum velocity of about twice its exhaust velocity. So we're talking about a form of propulsion that would allow us to reach 10% the speed of light, which is a marginal capability for interstellar travel. And the other thing that I think we're going to do, well, starting with Mars, this is a painting of Mars, not as it is, but as it could someday be after humans have transformed it, which I think we will do because it is the fundamental nature of life to take barren environments and transform them into places that are friendly to life. That's why life on Earth has been a success. And I think humans are the vanguard of life, spreading from Earth to other worlds. Now, why do we need to do this? I can think of a number of reasons. For the knowledge, for the challenge, for our survival, and for the future. First of all, for the knowledge. There's no better laboratory than the universe. The universe is the biggest lab there is. It's a place where we have discovered a lot of our knowledge of physics came from astronomy. And the law of gravitation, much of electromagnetism, relativity, nuclear fusion, and there are many mysteries about what underlies the laws of physics, and the place to discover them is in space. There's no better place to do astronomy. There's also no better place to do biology, actually, because Earth only has one kind of biology, uses DNA and RNA. That's its system for recording information. But there could be many other systems, and we'll only find them out by exploring other worlds. For our survival, the thing you need to understand about the Earth, a lot of people don't know where Earth is. But I'll tell you the answer. The Earth is in space. That's where it is. And like all other things in space, it's moving around. And all things that are moving around in space are subject to collisions with other things that are in space. And the Earth has been repeatedly hit by asteroids, which in some cases have caused mass extinctions. We have asteroids continue to hit the Earth. A significant one actually landed in the Bering Sea in December 2018 with a force equal to 10 times the Hiroshima bomb. Now, I don't agree with people who say, well, we need to go into space so that if the Earth is destroyed by an asteroid, there'll be survivors somewhere else. I think we need to go into space so that we will have the capability of diverting asteroids so that they don't hit the Earth. So we don't go to space to desert the Earth. We go to space to protect the Earth. Then there's the challenge. I think that human beings, that societies are like individuals. We grow when we challenge ourselves. We stagnate when we do not. And for example, here is data of number of science graduates in the United States from the period of 1960 through 1990. And what you can see is from 1960 to 1970, which is the period of the Apollo program, the number of graduates doubles and for certain categories triples. Why? Because a bold space program like we had in Apollo is an invitation to adventure to every young person. Learn your science and you can be an explorer of new worlds. And out of that, we got millions of young scientists, engineers, inventors, doctors, medical researchers, technological entrepreneurs. And those are the people who later built Silicon Valley. Yes, they are. So while the computer revolution, I mean, there was some computer technology developed by the space program, but really the way it drove the computer revolution was by producing the people that drove the computer revolution, intellectual capital. And a Humans to Mars program, a bold space program, would benefit every country that takes part by producing these kinds of people who are the kinds of people who advance civilization. And then there's another reason, and this is one that perhaps people in Ukraine can appreciate almost more than anyone else in the world. There is a threat to humanity. And I do not believe that it is climate change or resource exhaustion or even diseases that people talk about. I mean, these are issues, they have to be dealt with, but these were not the causes of the disasters of the 20th century. The causes of the disasters of the 20th century were caused by something else entirely, which was bad ideas. And in particular, one bad idea in a number of different forms. And that bad idea is that there isn't enough for everyone, okay? And so we need to fight over it. We need to kill other people to take their land because there isn't going to be enough for everyone, okay? And, you know, in 1912, General Friedrich von Bernhardi, one of the principal intellectuals of the German General Staff, wrote this book, which became an international bestseller, Germany in the Next War. And he said, look, Eurasia is either going to be controlled by Germany or Russia. Sooner or later, we're going to have to fight it out with them. Should it be sooner or later? Well, clearly sooner. We need to take down Russia before they industrialize. And so 2 years later, in 1914, the Germans took advantage of the pretext of the assassination of the Archduke to launch World War I, which is the seminal disaster of the 20th century, setting in motion other things, including the Holocaust, the Holodomor, communism, fascism, World War II, and the rest. And of course, in 1939, Hitler, even more hysterically, Germany needs living space. It was nonsense. Germany did not need living space. Germany today has a much higher standard of living than it did in the Third Reich, despite the fact that it lost the war. It has a higher standard of living, despite that it has more people on smaller land. Why? Because of the advance of science and technology, which has been achieved by humanity as a whole, including some contributions by Germans, but many from people of other nations that they were trying to exterminate. Okay, and today, okay, we see books like this, Destined for War, China and America. And I happen to know, because I have spoken to them, that there are people in the American national security establishment who believe that war with China is inevitable because there aren't enough resources in the world for both the West and a developed China. And you can bet there are people in Beijing who look at the world from the other side of the chessboard and think exactly the same thing. And if this kind of thinking is allowed to prevail, there will be war. And it's nonsense. It's nonsense, just as Hitler's Germany need living space was nonsense, but it can still start a war, okay? And to emphasize how nonsensical it is, here is a graph showing the truth, which is, here is the world's population going up, and does the GDP per capita, the total product per person, go up or down? The Malthusians would say, well, if there's more people, there should be less for everyone. But in fact, there has become more for everyone. Okay, how is that possible? It is possible because resources are determined, are created by technology, and technology is invented by people. And the more inventors, the more inventions, and therefore the more resources. And so the truth is that the true human condition is not one of nations in a struggle for survival over limited resources, but of a family of nations, admittedly a rather disorderly family, but nevertheless a family of nations, each making its own contributions to the store of inventions that advance humanity as a whole. But people don't see that. People don't see that. And they need to see it. And if we go to Mars and create a new world there, then people will understand that there's no need to be fighting over provinces when there's whole planets that can be opened for humanity. And that it's not true that there's only so much to go around here on Earth, because the Earth comes with an infinite sky. And that if we work together, we can throw it wide open. And that is the case for space. So I would be delighted to take questions.
Wow, that was a fascinating talk. Thank you so much, Dr. Zubrin. This is really inspiring. Yeah, I can see we have a bunch of questions already. I also have some questions prepared. So we will, you obviously gave a speech that ranged a variety of topics, and we will cover, I think, a number of them in questions from space entrepreneurship to Mars to foreign policy. But I would like to start with just reminding for some people who might be just joining us that Dr. Robert Zubrin is probably Earth's biggest enthusiast and advocate for Mars colonization, who have originally proposed the Mars Direct plan. That was actually exactly 30 years ago, right?
Yes.
30 years. In 1990, and that plan was possible to execute it in the 90s and actually go to Mars, for humans to go to Mars. But back then, there were a number of issues that prevented this from happening. I know that the early response was very positive and great press and very positive response from academic community. But then a number of political issues with American two-party system and maybe other issues prevented this from happening. And so now, as you argued, with new space entrepreneurs, there is this another opportunity to do this, window of opportunity. So I wonder, and you probably have thought about this a lot, I wonder, how do you think about different societal and political reasons that have prevented this from happening over the last 30 years, but now there is a possibility, and for how long do you think it will still remain open?
Well, the Mars Direct plan, frankly, was not adopted by the United States because of vested interests in NASA that felt it was, for instance, taking away the justification of the space station because it didn't use it, and because of, I would have to say, deterioration of the American political class. You know, during Apollo, you still had the same people around who won World War II. And they knew how to work together to accomplish great aims. By the 90s, this was no longer the case, and things have gotten worse since then, actually. You know, in the 80s, Al Gore was saying we should go together with the Soviets to Mars. And then Bush, the first Bush, came in and said, let's go to Mars. And Al Gore said, no, that's a stupid idea. And so they were sabotaging each other instead of working together. And and Bush's space exploration initiative fell apart as soon as Clinton was elected. And, you know, in the more recent period, you have the second Bush say, I want to go to the moon. Obama cancels it and starts an asteroid program. Trump cancels that and reinstates a moon program. Biden will probably be elected and will probably cancel Trump's program. You know, it's not invented here. We hate it.
Well, I think you recently interviewed Jim Bridenstine, and he said that he's building this kind of framework for NASA where it will not be as easy to cancel something and outdo something. Do you believe in that?
Well, Bridenstine, okay, the strong part of Bridenstine's tenure is his promotion of entrepreneurial space. I don't know if his Artemis program will survive the new administration, but what will survive is the growing entrepreneurial space community, which he has done a lot to help. Now, because see, here's the thing. I mean, take Musk as the prime example. He is committed to sending humans to Mars, and he doesn't care who is president and whether this was said by a Republican or a Democrat or whatever. He's continuing to develop the Starship. Now, you know, Musk says he's going to reach orbit with Starship next year. That's possible, but maybe it'll take 2 years. It doesn't matter whether it's 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years. He's going to do it. And once Starships are flying to orbit, and Musk is saying, look, you know, join with me and we can get to Mars, that's going to be a very difficult invitation to refuse. You know, whoever is elected president in 2024, if Starships are flying to orbit by then, will say, look at this, can we have people on Mars by the end of my second term? And the answer will be yes. Well, will it cost hundreds of billions of dollars? No, we can do this within the existing NASA budget. Okay, and then we can have a public-private partnership because, okay, Musk is developing the transportation system, which is the largest single thing needed to go to Mars. But there are many other things that are needed. Mars spacesuits, surface nuclear reactors, in situ propellant manufacturing systems, surface vehicles, and so forth. And it would be good if someone else stepped up to the plate to help develop that. And some of this is best developed by governments like nuclear reactors because they have access to the materials. Others can be developed by other entrepreneurial initiatives, but they need a market. They need a space program that will buy those things. So if we, so basically by making the Mars mission feasible, Musk is going to make it sellable. He's
right.
And therefore, I think it's going to happen. There's another dynamic here that goes beyond the vagaries of politicians.
Right. So as you said, it now becomes more possible because of the change of the institutional approach to it, right? Do you think
Yes.
this entrepreneurial approach was fundamentally impossible in the 90s? Like there was no critical mass, or is it like just Earth had to be bombarded by photons for some time to eject Elon Musk, or is there something else here in play? Is it like technology progress?
Well, there's a couple things going on here. In the 1960s, no one would have looked for a technological savior for the space program, an entrepreneurial savior, because the government space program was doing great.
Right.
Okay. And in the 70s, it stopped doing great, but people could still remember when it was doing great and just expecting it to just get its act together. And it took until the 90s when a lot of people started to say, look, if this is going to happen, somebody else is going to have to do it because these people aren't going to do it. And I have to admit myself to being somewhat late to the party because, see, I'm of a different generation than Musk. I was born in 1952. He was born in 1971. Okay, so my father, all of my uncles, all served in World War II. So did every adult man that I knew. And they had achieved victory. And not just victory, they had reorganized Germany and Japan to make them into democracies successfully. And the sense we had was that we could do anything. And in fact, it was that sense that carried us to the moon. Because when Kennedy in 1961 declared, we're going to the moon by the end of this decade, we didn't know how to do it. We just felt that, well, we can do anything, so we can go to the moon. And we did, okay? But by 1971, or I mean, certainly by the time Musk was old enough to know what was going on in the world, by the late 70s, okay, we had already lost the Vietnam War. And there was just a different sense about what was possible. And so, you know, until much more recently, I maintained my faith that the government could get its act together, whereas Musk always took the point of view that they're not going to do it, so I have to do it. Mm-hmm. Okay, and well, he's right. And the so I think it was in the 90s. Now, I mean, I did participate in an entrepreneurial space venture in the 90s myself, which had a certain amount of life to it, but eventually petered out. But but people started doing it in the 90s, and okay, in 2001, Musk comes to a Mars Society meeting in the Bay Area, and then a year later decides to launch SpaceX to make it all possible. And there it is. And so this idea was out there. And of course, Musk was not the only one recruited. As I say, I was part of a venture called Pioneer Rocket Plane, which did get some investment, but eventually ran out of steam. And there were others in the 90s. There were some had serious money, Beale, Rotary Rocket.
I think Paul Allen, very famously one of the
Paul Allen. But then there was Musk, and then also Blue Origin and Virgin Galactic. But with Musk, you finally had someone who had the right combination of both ability and resources, and I must say passion, to make a success of it. Now that he has succeeded, many others are getting in. I know that there's going to be a Chinese equivalent of SpaceX.
Right. So that was actually another question I was about to ask, as we talk about, those fundamental things that come into play to make space exploration possible. China, it appears to be doing more launches than anyone else, and yet I'm not seeing them being discussed as much in the mainstream media, at least in the US media. And it looks like they are combining both entrepreneurial and kind of government-funded approach. What do you think about the future of Chinese program, and how it can be different from the US space program?
Okay, well, there's two things going on in China. Okay, first of all, there is the government program, which is very aggressive. And, they have just sent a combined orbiter and lander rover mission to Mars, which, if it succeeds, will be a remarkable coup. The United States first did Mars flybys, then did orbiters, then did landers, and only finally did rovers. They're attempting to do all of that on the very first try. And so if they succeed, that will be amazing. And if they don't succeed, they're going to try again. No question about it. Because, China's concept of itself is rather different than what the Western concept of China is. The Western concept of China is that it's a developing nation like India or something. Okay, the Chinese concept of China is that China is the center of the world, and other places are peripheral, outlying locations, and that the past, century, what they call the century of humiliation from the mid 1800s to the mid 1900s was an exception, and now that is all going to be corrected, and they intend to correct it. And they're growing very fast, and certainly they view space as a place where it's important to be preeminent. And this is for a number of reasons, which include military reasons, commercial reasons, and reasons of prestige. So now this is therefore a major government initiative. Now, that sets the stage for entrepreneurial initiatives. And I know of at least 5 startups in China that actually have serious investment money behind them, who are trying to develop launch vehicles. And the one that I'm best acquainted with is trying to develop a launch vehicle, which frankly looks a lot like a Falcon 9. But why not? It's a very successful vehicle. And this is why, if Musk wants to stay in the lead, he's going to have to do something better than Falcons. And he knows that. Now, of course, just as was the case in the United States, where there were state allied interests that attempted to shut Musk out. Okay. Major aerospace companies with close links to the Air Force or NASA attempted to make it impossible for Musk to operate. But eventually he broke through because, that while there may be some people in the military bureaucracy who are friendly with Lockheed Martin, and from the point of view of the Air Force as an institution, having cheap launch available to them is very beneficial. And why should they have to pay 10 times as much for a launch just to make some friends happy? And so a cheaper product is a very strong argument. And so I think that one of these Chinese startups will succeed, and we will see a Chinese SpaceX. And certainly once it becomes credible, you can bet that the Chinese government is going to smile on it and help it. Now, you know, Russia needs a SpaceX, but there's a problem in Russia, which is the kleptomaniacal nature of the Putin regime, which is that while there's plenty of talent there, and there are people with lots of money who believe in space as an important area, if someone started a SpaceX in Russia and it was successful, they could expect it to be stolen. And so, frankly, unless they reform to create rule of law situation, they're not going to be able to do it. And we'll see.
Right. Actually, there is this one entrepreneur who maybe you've heard of, Mikhail Kokorich, who have founded Momentous Space, a company that does like last mile transportation in space, who did exactly that. He was trying to build a private space company in Russia, and then he had to immigrate in 2012 after Bolotna Square protests, and after he became like the personal enemy of the regime there. And now Mikhail, I was lucky to meet him in person, and he started his company Momentous in just 2017. And just a couple of weeks ago, the news was that they're going public with a valuation of $1.2 billion. So that's an illustration for what you were talking about. Now it's possible just in 3 years to make a new space company that is worth over $1 billion. What do you think about, if you've heard about Mikhail and his company, what do you think about that? And what do you think are most interesting areas in this new space race where, you know, if an entrepreneur is willing to start now, you know, over the next 10 years, they have reasonable chances of success?
Okay, well, okay. I don't know if Momentous is really worth $1 billion. So it may be somewhat overvalued, but it's worth a lot. And no matter how you put it, it's been a success, and it's illustrative of the sorts of success. And he did not start out with the kind of resources behind him that, for instance, Musk has, or Bezos has, or anyone like that. I think that there's an opportunity here for Ukraine, frankly, because Ukraine also has a lot of space talent. And it has an advantage, although maybe people in Ukraine, I can understand why they wouldn't see it as an advantage. They probably don't like it at all, but the fact that pay is lower there means that it could be possible to build an entrepreneurial space company there that has an extremely competitive position. Now institutions in Ukraine are still developing, but if Ukraine can solve this problem, and I think it's much more likely that Ukraine solves this problem soon than Russia, of creating a proper rule of law so that people can see it as investable, then you could see definitely a lot of entrepreneurial space activity in Ukraine. And and actually, I think, you know, there's a lot of reasons why Ukraine should foster this that go beyond, well, it's good to have business. As you know, Ukraine is an embattled state, and if Ukraine had had its own reconnaissance satellites, it could have prevented the defeat around Donetsk that happened in 2014.
Absolutely. So in other words, developing this space aerospace area is important for Ukraine's national defense, right?
It's critical. It's absolutely critical. And I mean, I'm myself as an American, I'm ashamed that we did not provide the reconnaissance information to Ukraine. I don't know why that was not done. But, you know, the safest thing is to be able to have your own information. And
absolutely.
And so, yes. So this is an area which is necessary for Ukrainian defense, but it's also an area that could greatly help Ukraine's economic development, both in the value that it itself brings and in the encouragement to the development of further intellectual capital that it would cause, that would allow Ukraine to develop computer industries, IT, or whatever. I mentioned that we doubled the number of science graduates in the United States in the 60s. And of course, I was one of them. I'm unusual in that generation in that I actually ended up working on space. Most of the others went into computers, which is why they're a lot richer than me. But but even so, I had more fun. Anyway,
So back to the original question, actually you went on the topic of why it is important for Ukraine to develop this. And I know there is really strong entrepreneurial community in Ukraine. In fact, I was participating in a space hackathon organized by the Ukraine Space Agency, which also embraces this entrepreneurial way. What do you think? So what Momentus did, they thought, okay, we need a good in-space transportation. They developed this new kind of engine that's powered by water that can be mined on moon and asteroids, and they're doing this thing, right? And you were talking about spacesuits and maybe some other needs that are gonna emerge in space. So if we're talking about the next 10 years, what are like top 3 areas that you think entrepreneurs should be looking at?
Well, I think the most obvious candidate would be spacecraft. Okay, that and these could be CubeSats, or they could be small sats, or they could be full-size satellites. But to be able to manufacture spacecraft, complete spacecraft economically to order, okay, so that if someone wants a communication satellite, they come to this place. Of course, Musk is making his own, but that's unusual. Most people who want to do a communication constellation, if they're in the communications business, might well want to go to a satellite provider. And Momentus created just a propulsion system, which is a subsystem of a satellite. And one can do that. There's all sorts of subsystems for satellite communication systems, attitude control systems, data handling systems. Every subsystem of a satellite is up for grabs, but complete satellites are also, in my view, up for grabs. That would require more initial capitalization than Momentus, but less capitalization than a launch company.
Right.
Okay. Now, obviously, as you know, Firefly is attempting to develop a launch vehicle.
Right.
And we'll see how that goes. But whether or not they succeed, I think there's room there for someone. But I would say first and foremost, spacecraft.
Got it. Thank you so much. I have a bunch more questions, but I know you said you will have about an hour and we're getting close there. How do you feel? Do you think we'll have maybe 10 minutes more?
Let's do 10 minutes more.
Okay, that's great. Thanks. So let's go to some questions from the audience now. And you know, one of the first questions we had, and I'm sure you get asked a lot, but it's just like, how many years do you think in how many years do you think space travel will become as familiar, as common as a flight to Hawaii?
Well, as familiar as a flight to Hawaii could take a while, but I think that we will see intercontinental travel by things comparable to Starship by the end of this decade. You know, it might be, you know, more unusual. It might be like flying on the Concorde was, okay. Because
so you're talking about things like flight from San Francisco to Beijing in like an hour.
Correct. Or San Francisco to Australia in an hour. Okay. Right. And you know, I ran the numbers on this, and for a Los Angeles to Sydney trip, and with Starship, and if certain problems can be solved, it works at a ticket price of around $20,000. Now, okay, that is more than I have ever paid for an airplane ticket, okay? But that is the price of a first-class airplane ticket from Los Angeles to Sydney right now.
Definitely less than a private jet.
Yeah, so there are people who do pay that.
Sure.
And the, and you would get there in less than an hour. You'd have half an hour of zero gravity and looking at space out the window. So that's not too bad. So, and therefore, what it would mean is the number of people going into space per year, instead of being in, you know, tens or 20, would be thousands.
And as far as I understand, that also means, you know, if such flights intercontinental are really commonplace, that also means that space tourism, just, you know, making a couple orbits around Earth, or maybe making it to the moon and back, would be also pretty commonplace. I mean the orbit of moon.
Well, certainly to a much greater extent than anyone can imagine. Now, I mean, look, these space planes, if you will, that can do intercontinental travel are basically going into orbit, and they can't. So one could easily imagine someone who has such capabilities saying, okay, look, maybe you're not that interested in going to Australia, but you'd like to be in space for more than half an hour. Well, we'll fly you and you can spend a day in space, okay? And so it's a day trip. And then at that point, someone can say, well, what if you want to spend a week? I'll build a space hotel. In other words, the Bigelow business plan, which is not yet practical, would become practical of space hotels and such. And then as these things become more common, and you're producing rocket engines, not in lots of 1 or 10 or 20, but in lots of thousands, then the space vehicles themselves will become much cheaper.
Right. It's, yeah, just the economies of scale. Makes a lot of sense. So another of our viewers is asking, where do you think is return on investments from Mars program?
Now, this is a complex, I mean, look, if you're talking about, you know, the near term, okay, then obviously anybody that makes technology such as launch vehicles, spacecraft, space systems that they can sell to the Mars program can make money. But if you're talking about, you know, what would be the profit? In other words, if you wanted to have a privately funded Mars colony, okay, that is, how can there be cities on Mars? Sure, if we get the government interested, we can fund a human Mars mission or even a Mars base. But how about a Martian civilization? It has to actually have an economic product, okay? And by the way, this was addressed by many of the people who participated in the Mars city-state design competition that was recently held at the Mars Society Convention, and people can see their presentations online. To me, the most convincing thing is IP, intellectual property. You know, I mean, that's fundamentally what I produce. Where do I get my food? I don't grow my food in the backyard. I buy it at the store with money that I get by selling intellectual property, i.e. space technology that I have developed. A Mars colony, I think will be a fantastic engine for developing technology. And
basically like one big venture accelerator, right? And whoever invests in it gets a cut of all the IP that will be created.
Right, exactly. In other words, that's how it could be done. And you say, well, why not build that on Earth? Well, you can, but I think that the people who go to Mars are going to be zealots. In other words, in terms of the focus and concentration and the dedication of these people, they're not just people say, well, it's a good job, but I just got an offer from somewhere else, see you around. No, it's they're committed to something. And, you know,
the same kind of people who were colonizing the Wild West in the United States.
Well, yes. Although I would pick, there's three examples I could choose of remarkable and very counterintuitive colonization efforts over the past 400 years. One was the Pilgrims going to Massachusetts. Another was the Mormons going to Utah. And the other was the Jews going to Palestine in the 20th century. Okay, now all three of these groups had religious motivations. They wanted to create their own promised land. They wanted to create their own world, but that's important. In other words, they had a transcendent idea. It was more involved than just profit. Okay, they had a certain ideal they were attempting to do, and they were willing to put up with a tremendous amount of hardship in order to realize that. And all three of those efforts were, against considerable adversity, very successful. And they were they were all backed by strong home front organizations that helped provide some of the money to get the actual colonists to where they were going. And this is even still the case with Israel today. But they're all trying to create their own, what we call a shining city on a hill. And, you know, I think the Mars colonists will have some of that too, because
do you think the Mars Society has a shot at becoming this kind of, a religion or so to say, community pushing that and supporting it by resources and financially and by other resources?
Well, eventually, perhaps, yes. But look, it's a vision, it's a cause, and you either understand the importance of humanity becoming interplanetary or you don't. Now, a lot of people do, okay, and some of them, to the extent that they're willing to put themselves on the line to do it. And those people, when they go to Mars, are going to be very dedicated. So I think, yes, I'd love to have those people working for me. So I think it's investable, or it will be investable once the numbers come together. Okay, so the transportation costs come down, and the amount of stuff you need to transport to Mars to support a given number of people goes way down, because we have the technology to make most of what we need on Mars.
Right, right. So it will be a curve, but it will be picking up,
right,
of course. So just a reminder, that was an answer to a question about what will be, what is the return on investments in terms of Mars program. Another question comes, which is very interesting, and it touches the topic of the role of animals in the colonization of Mars. I know that you have, I believe, two dogs, Strelka and Kepler, right?
Yes.
And obviously, I am connected with animals through the company that I run. So the question is, what do you think will be the role of animals in the Mars colonization? Will there be, first animal missions before we send humans? Will there be like data analysis about the effects of the long-term stay? How do you think about that possibility?
Well, I don't think we're going to send animals before people, but we're going to send animals with people. Dogs are man's best friend. And, we wouldn't be where we are today without them. Now, of course, dogs are not essential on Mars for protecting sheep from wolves, but they're part of our community. Okay, so we're gonna bring dogs to Mars for the same reason we're gonna bring orchestras to Mars. Is that they're part of our civilization. Now, there are other animals that we're going to bring to Mars because they are necessary from the point of view of we're going to bring chickens to Mars so that we can have eggs and we can have chicken, and we'll bring fish to Mars so we can have fish farms, and so forth. So we will bring various animals with us to Mars for various reasons, but certainly not only the necessary animals of agriculture, but the animals that are part of our civilization.
Right, but likely there will be no like Strelka moment for Mars.
Well, okay, Strelka. Okay, I guess Ukrainians know the original Strelka. Belka were the first dogs who went to space and came back
before
alive.
Korolev, who's Ukrainian, by the way, for those of who might not know, before Korolev sent Yuri Gagarin to space, they sent Strelka, Belka and Strelka, two dogs in
right,
space.
Yes. And in fact, Strelka not only survived the trip, but she had puppies afterwards.
Right.
And one of them, Pushinka, was given by Khrushchev to Jackie Kennedy when he came here. And her descendants are still alive today. But as I say, we're going to bring dogs to Mars for the same reasons we're going to bring orchestras to Mars.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. So getting back to some of the Ukraine-connected topics, there was recently a memorandum of understanding signed between the Ukrainian Space Agency and Chinese Space Agency. And you've talked before about Chinese space program developing and so on. But then some commentators in social media have criticized or have questioned this memorandum, saying, well, look, China is a potential adversary of our most important ally, the United States. So how do you, and then you were talking prominently about, this feeling that there is enough for everyone and there should be a cooperation between nations. So how do you feel about that? And what would you say to people who have questioned this move by Ukrainian Space Agency?
Well, it depends. I don't know enough about it, but certainly just due to the nature of things, I'd favor civil space cooperation, but I would limit it to civil space, not military space. Look, the goal is to have a world where we understand that we're really all friends, but we're not there yet. But it is a question of a frame of mind, because I mean, you know, in 1914, Europe was doing better than it ever had been in human history. All right, I mean, by far, and yet they tore themselves to pieces because they decided for some reason they had to be enemies. And then again in 1939. Although that came from more or less a single source, Hitler wanted to have a war. Okay, but but still, it was all in their minds. And if there's another war, it's going to be
wanted to have a war as well, right? So it's gonna looks like Stalin wanted to have a war as well, but I don't want to get into that discussion. But,
right.
Yeah.
Well, who knows? But in any case, but it was all in their minds. There was no necessity for war. So
talking about this Ukraine-China cooperation on this.
Okay, so you know, I think civil cooperation is useful, and to the extent it encourages friendships, it's very useful. To the extent it encourages understanding, it's extremely useful. But I mean, I have to say that Ukraine belongs with the West.
Right. I'm totally with you. And, you know, there's this kind of saying that I have, that Ukraine is kind of the eastern edge of the Western civilization.
It is. It's the front line.
It is the frontier, yes. And you know, from the things I'm seeing in the entrepreneurial community, there is you know, a higher rate of innovation per capita in Ukraine than in most of other places I've seen, maybe including Silicon Valley. If you talk across the board, not just about like computer technology, but just across the board, it's fascinating. Robert, I know we're running out of time, so I have to kind of find the last question for you, and then I'll let you go. So my last question, you know, I know you have spoken again and again on the topics of the U.S. foreign policy, and you touched that today as well, and kind of the future of the free world and the Western world. And I think it would be a great way to finish our conversation for you to speak about how you see the future of Ukraine as a part of this free world, and how people who are passionate about space can be a part of of that future.
Okay. Well, first of all, what Ukraine needs to do to help the West is to succeed. No, I mean it. Get rich. Because it is that will lead to the liberation of Russia. You know, the reason why Putin launched his offensive against Ukraine when Ukraine turned away from his Eurasian Union towards the European Union was the fear that Ukraine would become like Poland. Okay, and the reason why he's afraid of that is obviously not because of any military threat that Ukraine poses to Russia, because it doesn't, but because Russians would then start asking, why can't we do this too? And as you know, there are sufficient social connections between Ukraine and Russia that there'd be no way of keeping a successful Ukraine a secret in Russia. No way at all. And so the secret to liberating Russia is a successful Ukraine. Okay, and it would be really great to liberate Russia. Okay, and
that's one of the big interests for the Western world, right?
It is, and if that were to happen, that would, in my view, remove any serious threat of war in Europe. And also, it would create a Western world that was of sufficient strength, including what is now the West and Ukraine and Russia, to how can I put it? To come to an understanding with China. Because, you know, Russia has a choice right now. If you want to know, the country that is most endangered from China is Russia. They really are. And I don't think that's the future that Russians really want. Of a totally controlled society. And I think Russia needs to join the West, and the only way to really show them the way to the West is Ukraine.
And the role of Ukrainian aerospace enthusiasts and engineers and all the engineers in this is what? A cooperation with the United States?
Yes, and also, I mean, look, if you're successful, you'll be competing with US companies, but that's great. That's, you know, how progress happens is through, you know, civilized competition. And it adds to the capability and the health of the whole ecosystem. And, you know, the West is strong because of multitudes of contributions, American companies, British companies, French companies, German companies, Polish companies, and yes, let's have Ukrainian companies in the mix. You know, let's work together. You know, I think that America should do everything it can to help Ukraine succeed, and not only with national defense, but in business. I've written an article calling for an American university to be established in Kiev. I think that'd be a great idea to teach both technology and entrepreneurship and civics. But look, all I ask of you is that you succeed.
All right. Thank you so much. That's a fantastic message to everyone watching. And thank you so much for being such an advocate for space exploration and for kind of coming to understanding within our human community here on Earth, which is, I think, is also a very important part of your advocacy and of things you do. Dmitro?
I want to thank you both. Thank you, Robert, and thank you, Yaroslav. I hope we'll see you on our platform in a month. And also, I want to announce another event from another Yaroslav, from Yaroslav Pustavy, an astronaut, and we'll meet with him on the 14th of November. Again, thanks a lot for an amazing event. I believe it was really useful for young people and for Ukrainian space societies. Thank you.
Okay, my pleasure, and good luck with everything.
Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.